Someone had made the suggestion. What is your job? I mean, I know you said marketing strat, but briefly, could you say what your job entails?
Yeah, sure. So I report to the SVP of Consumer Products, who leads all of our licensing, retail, and gaming business. I act as a chief of strategy kind of role. So basically working around the league from our teams to everybody across our building who does football operations to our sponsorships and marketing, and really connecting the dots on how we drive growth within anything with an NFL logo. So our jersey sales, our hat sales, even more innovative things like gaming, franchises, esports, and ultimately our e-commerce platform, NFL Shop.
Great.
I keep it pretty broad because it's a jack of all trades.
Okay. But not what you would necessarily be thinking you were going to be doing with a bachelor's of science in chemistry.
No, and I tried every avenue of that. I looked at law school. I worked in a lab for a little bit. I looked into secondary education. Ultimately, did not think. If you ask my parents who was going to be working in the NFL when I was in college of my siblings, I would have been the last one that they would have picked out of the bunch.
Excellent, terrific, thank you. Nicole, you're next.
Hi, Nicole Gambino. I'm based in San Francisco. I graduated from TCNJ in 2003 with a degree in math. I had gone for math teaching and decided during my junior year that being a teacher was not my path. So I actually went the law school route and went straight through and went to UCLA for law school. And then after about a dozen years practicing as a tax lawyer, decided that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. So now I am a real estate agent, which I think is probably pretty self-explanatory, but working with buyers looking for a home and sellers getting their homes ready for sale and getting them onto the next chapter.
Thank you. And so you could hold 2 seats on this panel since you've had 2 career shifts, let's say. Great, thanks. Mike.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be a part of this event. My name is Mike Fisher. I graduated in 2003 with a degree in biology. When I entered TCNJ, I was thinking of gearing everything toward eventually applying for chiropractic or medical school. But the more courses I took and the more I talked with professors and my classmates, I decided I wanted to pursue a PhD in the biological sciences. So that's what I did after TCNJ. Now I'm a senior fellow at the Federation of American Scientists, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization in Washington, DC. And most of my work is geared toward connecting the science community and evidence-based information with members of Congress and their staff. So that can look like things like organizing a briefing between a group of scientists and a member of Congress and their staff on a particular issue, or reading out and analyzing a congressional hearing for its science and technology policy issues, or updating the program officers at the philanthropies that fund our work with the progress we've made on our grants and things like that. So yeah, I would say my work is pretty different day to day. And it's interesting and engaging.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Jayson, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks to Pamela and Amanda for putting this together. So hi everyone, I'm Jayson Punwani. I'm currently a co-founder of a small biotech company here in San Diego called Coho Therapeutics. I graduated from TCNJ in 2000, which is a long time ago. And my major was biology with a minor in chemistry. When I entered TCNJ, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew what I didn't want to do, and I knew I didn't want to do the med school route, which was somewhat helpful for me and somewhat clarifying, but really didn't know what I wanted to do. And we'll touch on this later during the discussion, but the BMS internship really crystallized my interest in research and led me down the path to pursue a PhD. And then, after doing a postdoc, I decided I didn't want to do bench science anymore and academic research. And then, much like Dan went and did an MBA to pivot into finance. And for the last 10 years, I've been a venture capitalist, biotech VC, and as I mentioned, co-founded a company recently. So as a biotech VC, essentially what we do is raise money from investors and then invest that money on behalf of investors in very early stage, very risky private biotechnology companies that are developing, therapeutics or treatments for diseases that have high unmet medical need. So we make these investments and then monitor and help those portfolio companies grow and achieve milestones, and then hopefully ultimately exit those investments to return capital to our investors.
Thank you. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Flanagan. I am a patent attorney at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. And I am also from a class of 2000. My bachelor's was in biology. And I entered TCNJ wanting to go the pre-med route. And about halfway through, I did a summer internship with a family practitioner and thought, I'm not really sure that this is what I'm passionate about. And so tried to figure out what were my other options. And as I saw it, it was really, I could go down a research route or a teaching route. And of the two, I was a little more interested in the research route. I also did a BMS internship like Jayson. And, but really what was interesting for me about the research route was that, going to get an advanced degree would open up more avenues and kind of help me maybe see other possibilities. And it would really help me bide my time before I had to, actually make a decision of what I wanted to do. So I went to UCLA for grad school, and about halfway through grad school, I was at an alternative careers seminar panel, and I heard from a patent agent and a patent attorney, and they were talking about what they do every day. And they do like reading and writing and thinking about science. And that was really resonating with me, especially at the time, because I was in the middle of writing a review article for the dissertation work that I was doing like in the field. And that was what I loved most, not the bench science, but like actually thinking about it and writing about it. And so I did a little research into what patent law entailed and decided to take the plunge and go that route. So I did that, went to law school, became a patent attorney. And so what I do on a day-to-day basis is I make sure that we have patent protection and intellectual property clearance for the candidate drugs in our product pipeline. So from things that are in the preclinical, like still screening stage, to clinical candidates, to approved products. And I spend my days thinking about science, and I write patent applications and revise legal documents. I talk to scientists, I'm reading literature. And so it's really, really intellectually stimulating, but just not what I thought I would do when I started at TCNJ.
Great, thank you. And as you're all sort of talking, I'm thinking about questions to ask. And part of the thread of what you just talked about is, the liberal arts education and the other things that you might have learned at TCNJ that I hope we'll get a chance to touch on as we move forward. Thank you, Lisa. So Cece.
Yes, hello. I'm Cece Johnson. I graduated in 2017 with a double major in biology and self-designed biological illustration. Now I am a freelance biomedical illustrator and a project manager at a company called W2O RadScience. RadScience kind of falls under the umbrella of a pharmaceutical creative agency, which I think for like most people conjures the thoughts of like when you're watching TV and you see a commercial with like montages of people like holding hands and walking through the park. That's not the sort of stuff that we do. We work on educational materials, mainly for drugs that are still in the clinical trial phase. I'd say about 50% of the work we do are educational animations or illustrations, either for like presentations or websites. The other 50% of the work we do is for conferences, which is really fun. The way that was first described to me was like scientific party planning. But it's basically like designing and developing educational engagements to draw people into the conference booth and educate them either about a disease state or a drug's new like mechanism of action.
Thank you. Thanks. So, I have some questions, and maybe we'll just start, and I will, call on folks if that's okay. So our first question, I'm going to start with you, Lisa, just so you know, as I say the question. So, if you can think back, what courses or people at the College of New Jersey had the biggest impact on the trajectory of your, your career, your future years, and what was that impact?
When I think back to to, you know, so I was a double major in biology and philosophy, but like really, I think most of my time is like really centered on the biology stuff. And really the first person who comes to mind was my mentor, Steve Klug. And he was not actually the first mentor that I'd had. You know, when we started as freshmen, we had someone assigned to us. And, you know, and it was just like not the best fit. And so I sought out a different mentor, and that was a game changer for me, because it was just, you know, finding somebody who I felt comfortable talking to, and someone who really saw, you know, the potential in me, and try to do everything that he could to bring opportunities to me and let me know. You know, I while I was at TCNJ, I worked in his fly lab, and you know, worked through. I found out about the BMS internship through that, and really, it was just like I wouldn't have gotten into UCLA's grad program without the experience of BMS internship. I probably wouldn't necessarily have thought about getting a PhD without that, and I wouldn't have known about that without you know, a mentor like him. So that really, just like finding a person who you connect with, who you feel like is really looking out for you and helping you, is it opens up so many doors.
Yeah, that's great. And I think other folks will touch on that as well. But, you know, as you said, finding a mentor, your active role in that process, and thinking about, you know, as you said, you were assigned an advisor or a mentor, and if that didn't work, trying to seek out, you know, advice from other folks that were a better potential fit with you. And that's a really important piece of this, I think. So Jayson, maybe I'll go to you with the same question.
Yeah, I mean, so to echo everything Lisa said, it's uncanny. I mean, I also, Dr. Klug was my mentor as well. And so the only thing, Dr. Lovett was not an official mentor, but I'll come back to that story. But just on your mentor, I think the only thing I could really add is, you know, if I recall, it's a little bit fuzzy, but, you know, there were specified times that you had to meet with them, I think, to schedule classes or to figure out exactly what your requirements were. You know, try not to, you know, I would say encourage you to meet with your mentor just beyond those mandatory time periods, right? These are people who've seen a lot of students come through, you know, they have successful careers themselves. They have this diaspora of alumni that they know. And so really use them as a resource. That's the one thing I'd encourage you. It's not, you know, don't think of it as like a chore. And I developed a relationship with Dr. Klug, and I wouldn't go as far as to say he was a therapist, but certainly in, you know, my freshman year, I was in his office pretty frequently, just bouncing ideas off him about what I wanted to do. And, you know, just like Lisa said, he was pretty instrumental in me getting the BMS internship. And I also made a bunch of fly food for a semester for his fly lab class, and it definitely can still smell the fly food burned in a neuron somewhere in there. And then the other person who was pretty important was Dr. Lovett, who I didn't really interact with until I think it was junior or maybe even senior year. I took a microscopic anatomy class, and again, just somehow connected with him and reached out to him outside, you know, extracurricularly outside of the class. And he was, you know, also very insightful and guided me towards thinking about the PhD trajectory. So think about mentors that you're assigned, as well as those that are, you know, unassigned.
Yeah, and I like what you said also in terms of not being afraid to, you know, so not restricting your interactions with them to those assigned time periods, because frankly, if they're seeing 30 students in 3 days, don't be afraid to approach folks. You know, if you see somebody sitting in their lab doing some work, you can stick your head in. We can usually multitask. So I think those are some good points.
I mean, this is why you came to TCNJ, right? Versus
right.
Some giant, you know, in university, right? The professors here care about the students. They have time. They're willing to put the time in. Like, take advantage of that resource. It's extremely invaluable. And as you move further in your career, you'll find out that, you know, the people who went to the 50,000 person schools and universities didn't have that opportunity, and, you know, I think struggle as a result of that.
Absolutely. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, so a little bit different. I mean, I was going on this course while I was at TCNJ where at first I wanted to go to med school, and I shadowed a couple doctors, and I was like, nope, I actually don't want to do that. So then I put myself in a volunteer opportunity to teach a couple classes to some high schoolers. And after a couple of versions of that, I was like, I'm not good at this either. So then I interned at a lab at Church and Dwight. And after a summer, I was like, I want something where I'm interacting with people and I'm working in groups and I'm working more collaboratively. So I decided I was going to go to law school. And I went to the career services to talk through my law school application. And I actually met with Colleen Perry, who is no longer with the school, but was part of that organization at the time. And she sat down with me and she read through my application and she was like, you know, you don't want to go to law school, right? And I was like, well, I've tried everything else. So like, I'm going to give this a shot. This seems like a good path. And she was just like, I will review your law school application. We'll get it in a good place. But what do you actually like doing? Like, what do you see yourself doing? Where do you see yourself going? And unlike Jayson, I actually did have a therapy session with her. And we talked for about an hour and a half. And at the end of it, she was like, I'll look at your application if you go try one internship in marketing. And after about 2 weeks of trying it, I was like, you can actually throw out my application. I'm definitely going to figure out marketing, like guns to blazing, like no stopping me. I'll figure out how to get into that industry. And she really did change my life from that point on.
That's great. And I like to hear, and other offices on campus, right? I'm very School of Science focused, but, your mentors and advisors in the School of Science, as I've said to someone, an unconventional path for us means somebody had a job before they went back and got their PhD. So it's really great to hear, career services. And I think they have a slightly different name now, but yeah, that's great to hear other places on campus.
Just use every resource at your disposal on campus. Make sure you're using it. Like that's why you're at TCNJ. That's why you're at a university or a college.
Yeah, absolutely great. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, so along the lines of what others have said, stopping professors in the halls, going to office hours. Yeah, I remember having really meaningful conversations with Professors O'Connell, Lovett, Morrison, and Shevlin, and Professor Norvell, who I did research with my whole senior year. Just really great experiences, really great opportunities to get advice from folks who have already walked the paths and have really good advice to hand down.
Thanks, Mike. And how about you, Nicole?
Yeah, so I did not mention this in my introduction, but I actually started TCNJ as a biology major. I had applied through the 7-year med program, did not get into the 7-year med, but showed up at orientation and got my schedule and said, this is a lot of biology. I don't even like biology that much. What was I thinking? And I was like, I like math. So I walked over to the School of Math and walked into Ed Conjura's office and said, I want to change my major. And he said, we don't have any classes even available this fall for like incoming math students. You're gonna have to take linear algebra at 8 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. And I was like, that's fine, I'll do it. I just don't want to do biology. And then he ended up being my assigned mentor. And I, like everyone else said, taking the time to spend time outside of those assigned times, like he was great through, the time I was there. And I did, I loved my math classes. It was more just when I got to the point of student teaching and realizing it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. Having those conversations with him and Dr. Clifford about other options and knowing, well, law school doesn't have any prerequisites. I'm just going to take the LSAT and see how that goes. And they were all very encouraging about that. And I think to your other point, having had the background, and we probably will get into this some more too, but just the liberal arts classes, once I got to law school, having math set me apart and made me more logical and just gave me an edge in certain ways, and even interviewing later, but having the ability to write and communicate and doing all of those things, especially just taking rhetoric. There's a lot of colleges that you don't take that as your, English 101. And that is such an important skill that TCNJ really set you up well for.
Thanks, Nicole. And, again, one of the threads that I'm hearing through conversations here are, you might not know exactly what you want, but sometimes this is not for me. I've heard a couple of people say, I knew I didn't want to do this, and I knew my talent didn't lie in this particular area. But, and trusting your gut instinct on that sometimes is probably an important thing to do. Cece, how about you?
Yeah, for me, what influenced me the most at TCNJ was a course. I had to fulfill a liberal learning requirement, and I took Experiencing Art 101 to fulfill that requirement. At this point, I had no interest in art as a career. I knew I loved biology. I wanted to do something with biology, but I really enjoyed the course, and I think I surprised myself with the work that I was creating in that course. So then the next semester I had some time in my schedule and I decided to challenge myself. And so I took drawing with other art majors. I ended up loving that. So then the next semester I took painting, and both of those courses were with Gregory Thielker. And this is what like really changed my career trajectory. Was at the end of the painting course, Gregory Thielker offered me a summer art assistantship to help him finish painting his artwork for an upcoming New York City gallery exhibit. And that had a huge impact on me because at that point I was just thinking art was a fun hobby, but that was sort of like a, oh my gosh, somebody will pay me to do artwork. And it really gave me confidence to pursue art as a career. But I still loved the biology side of things. And that same summer that I was doing the art assistantship with Gregory Thielker, I was also doing the Muse program with Dr. Butler. At that point, I knew that I wasn't interested in going into biology research, but I told Dr. Butler about biomedical illustration, and he let me spend like additional time in his lab outside to paint bird specimens. And then he gave me the opportunity to create illustrations for a chapter in an ornithology textbook, which was directly related to the research that I was doing in his lab. So just the combination of like Gregory Thielker helping me out with the artwork and having the confidence to pursue artwork, and then Dr. Butler letting me like use resources in his lab and connecting me with other people that I could talk to about biological illustration. Just extremely helpful, really changed my path.
That's great, thanks. And it's good to hear the names of folks that I know or people that are still around and people who've left TC&J, so that's terrific. So my next question, I'm really intrigued to hear what the answers are to this next question. So the next question is basically, given especially given the breadth of things that you all do now, do you use your degree? Do you use it a little, in your current job? Do you use what you learned in your degree? And I guess we could think about both the scientific piece of it as well as maybe the broader things you learned at TC&J. Do you use it a lot? Is it tangential to what you do? Did having a scientific background give you a leg up compared to other people? So again, I'm really interested to hear what people have to say. So maybe let's start with Lisa for this one.
Yeah, so having so I use my degree, my science background every day. And it was also a necessary prerequisite basically for getting into patent law. So for patent law, you can be a patent agent or you can be a patent attorney. And the difference is patent attorney goes to law school, patent agent is not. But in order to qualify for practicing in front of the US Patent Office, you have to have a background in the hard sciences. And usually that's demonstrated by showing you have a bachelor's in science in a particular field. So to get my foot even in the door as a patent attorney, I'm relying on the Bachelor of Science. But in my day-to-day job now, every day I'm thinking about science, and it's not so much the coursework that I learned, because obviously graduating in 2000 stuff changed, but it's really like the understanding just biology, just fundamentally biology, and then just understanding that here's things where I know the basics, and here's where I need to really deepen my understanding and know how to do literature research, and know when I know that I need to ask certain questions or I need to get more information. I mean, that's every single day that's part of what I'm doing. So yeah, it's absolutely instrumental in my job.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm just going to, Cece, you're to the right of Lisa. How about you?
Yeah, I 100% use my biology degree. Right after TC&J, I went to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine to get my master's in medical and biological illustration. And there I had to take anatomy courses, I had to take pathology and histology, and that was with the medical students in the same year. So I had to have a strong biology background to keep my head afloat with the med students there. Now that I work full time in the pharma creative agency, all the focus of everything that we're creating is either pathophysiology, drug MOAs, and they need to all have accurate visuals and information that go along with them. So it's necessary to have that strong biology foundation, and just the ability to read and interpret research papers. If it's not something that I learned directly about in undergrad, then being able to like understand the papers that are being thrown at me before you can even begin like sketching to start an illustration.
Great, thanks. Jayson, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely use the degree on a daily basis. I think, you know, the science aspect of it obviously was a prereq for grad school to get a PhD, but, you know, even beyond that, when you get a PhD, you focus on something very narrow, right? And so having that, you know, broad scientific, you know, understanding of anatomy, physiology, immunology, you know, all those sorts of disciplines that I didn't focus on in grad school, to at least have that basis of understanding, like understanding the vocabulary. You know, as Lisa mentioned, things have evolved in 20 years, but being able to start from you know, not ground zero, being able to have a little bit of a leg up as you look into a new technology is super helpful. And then, you know, on the non-science parts of the degree, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest, you know, skill set that you can learn, or that I learned, was communication, written, oral, and understanding how to communicate complicated concepts in a very short, you know, period of time and in a short package. That's a huge skill, and that was learned through, you know, all the papers that I had to write on Sunday nights at midnight for history and literature, and as well as you know, rhetoric, which was mentioned earlier. So absolutely use both the science parts of my degree and the non-science parts.
And I would imagine, and you know, this is my naive view of it, but you know, in thinking about, you know, modern molecular biology, molecular medicine, the places where startup companies are happening, you know, and so, you know, you do venture capital of biotech and therapeutics. So I would imagine that your degree is integral to you trying to evaluate how likely something like that is to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you know, we're not experts when we evaluate a technology. You can't be an expert. The other thing it's a great point, Amanda. You need to know how to communicate with the experts, right? So you sort of outsource your diligence a lot. So it's not that I know a lot about, you know, B cells, but I need to be able to talk to a scientist who knows a lot about B cells and be able to understand, you know, what they're saying. Are they, being honest in what they're communicating, understand their enthusiasm about the technology, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. And Dan, how about you? Do you use your chemistry degree or your science?
Yeah, actually more than one would expect, I would say, which is entertaining. So I'd say there's three main ways I use it. So first, when we're doing a lot of our digital marketing, which I lead for our products team, we do a lot of hypothesis-driven thinking, which is in the same format that a traditional lab experiment would be in. So really outlining in context what we're out to discover.
Did we lose Dan? We'll give him a sec. I was saying that this is the, you know, the new normal in doing these things. So maybe we'll come back to Dan when oh, there he is. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
You're good.
All right. Yeah, so what I was saying is it's very much in the laboratory format. So, we really are talking in what is our hypothesis, and then what's the data that's backing it up, and then running A/B testing to really support that. The second area is in consumer segmentation. We run, not just at the NFL, but in all my prior experience as well, a lot of consumer surveys, and we'll run regression analyses against anywhere from 50 to 1,500 variables of data inputs to really see how we can divide up our consumers and really market them, develop products for them, develop brands for them. And that's just another way I'm still using regression analysis that I learned in my lab days. And then I would say the final one is I always make it one of my 2 truths and a lie in any corporate setting. And I usually win out on that one.
I'm sure you do. That's actually really funny. Comes in handy. Nicole, how about you? And you can address it from either of your 2 careers. How about that?
So I would say as a real estate agent, I'm not using my math degree. But I would say that, you know, in my prior career as a tax attorney, I really ended up on the path of being a tax attorney because of my math degree, and not necessarily that you need to be good at math to do tax law, because it's really just code-based. But initially one all summer, I ended up I was assigned as a research assistant to 2 tax professors. And the reason I was assigned to them was because most people in law school are afraid of numbers. And so the librarian was like, you're going to get these 2 because everyone else will cry. And so here you go. And working with them that summer and just seeing kind of tax policy, and it's a really interesting area of law. And then talking to people that practice tax, it's very problem solving oriented and planning based. And so just having that mathematical way of thinking really, helped me to see like this was a good fit for me. And it also gave me a leg up when I was interviewing, because there aren't that many people with a math degree that go to law school. So it was just a way to set myself apart. And then just once I actually got into practice, the area I practiced in was renewable energy finance, and there were a lot of financial models. And so I spent a lot of time in Excel spreadsheets, which again, just having the baseline understanding of being able to look at those and understand those really, just helps me in my career.
That's great, thanks. And I'm hearing, again, a theme that I'm hearing through is ways of thinking, hypothesis, based testing, thinking mathematically, and those are the types of, transferable skills that you would get, potentially with a science degree. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, members of Congress kind of tend to swing to high profile issues. And so before the pandemic, kind of like the bioeconomy, all the life sciences industry inputs into the economy was a really big issue. And so having that biology base was really helpful. And then of course, unfortunately the pandemic hit. And so, many members of Congress and their teams were really interested in getting good information about the pandemic, whether it was about vaccine manufacturing or the potential for monoclonal antibody therapies, things like that. So for me, it's pretty daily that I use it for my work. And then more generally, I think it's just also really helpful to have this understanding about how scientific knowledge comes from this really rigorous knowledge creation process and this like healthy skepticism, which is really helpful for just evaluating news that you come across or social media posts, things like that, and being able to have conversations with friends and family about whether they should be taking these things with a grain of salt or as like the truth, things like that.
Right, that's very important these days. I'm looking at the time and we're having some really great conversations, but I want to, so, I'm going to kind of put 2 questions together and you can decide which one you want to answer, because I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for people in the audience to ask questions. So the 2 that I would throw out there, and you can answer one or the other or merge them together, would be, looking back, would you do anything differently? So that's one. And then the second one is back to the idea of mentors and thinking about the theme of choosing a different path, going in a different route. I know in conversations with a lot of you, we talked about, when you might have decided to go in a different direction. For some of you, it was early on in your college career. And for some of you, it was after you got a PhD in the biological sciences. So, would you do something differently? And if you're thinking about changing trajectory, how do you go about doing that? And thinking about mentors or things like that. So I'm going to start with Cece this time. How about that?
Sure. Okay, I guess I will answer the second question for how you would go about changing and finding mentors. For me, it was really just talking to all of my professors in the art field and in the biology courses. A lot of people that I talked to didn't know what biomedical illustration was, or they hadn't met other people who were biomedical illustrators, but everybody was extremely supportive of my decision and was very helpful for me switching over. I think it was Dr. Butler who helped me first meet with Dr. Pecor to self-design a second major so that I could go into biological illustration and have those art classes under my belt so that I could apply for the grad school. But besides that, it was just really helpful talking to as many people as I could about it. I know for all of my biology classes, I would always talk to the professors and tell them what I was interested in. And so I was taking an entomology course, and the entomology professor lent me beetles from his personal collection, and I ended up painting those, and those ended up being one of my portfolio pieces to get into grad school. Talking to my art professors, they would let me leave my one drawing art class so I could go over and take a science class at the same time. And then I'd go back to the art class at the end of it because art classes were 6 hours long. So really just talking to everybody and explaining to them, I found that everyone, really wants to be helpful and wants to help you succeed.
Thank you. How about Nicole? How about you?
I'll take the first question. And I would say it was a very convoluted path to get me where I am now, but I wouldn't change anything because I think, I've built relationships and I've learned so much through the years, and I wouldn't be in San Francisco had I not been on this path. Like, there's so many things about life that gets you to where you are. And I think it's just being comfortable with taking those leaps of faith when it's time to take them and having the support to do that. I definitely think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to, know what you want to do when you start college and know what you want to do when you finish. And you're so young. And, I think it's totally fine that, I was in my mid 30s and I walked away from being a partner at a law firm because I wasn't happy. And most people thought I was crazy, but I'm really happy now. So I think it's really important to just go with the flow and just be happy.
Great. That's really good. And just as, not to make a sweeping generalization about, risk takers or people who are more comfortable with changing paths, there are some people who that is the scariest thing in the world for them, right? So, whether or not you are as an individual comfortable in making a change or feel supported in making a change, let's say.
Yeah, and I would say, I will freely admit that if I did not have my therapist, I definitely would not be on this path. Like, she helped me a lot to get to where being comfortable with making those life choices. So
absolutely. Great. Thanks. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I think that I'm probably more on the risk averse side, but I've also taken some pretty wild swings. And I think one thing that's made that possible is because I've volunteered in activities that are very similar to the things that I ended up going into. For example, during my first postdoc, I was volunteering to help out with science outreach activities, like hands-on learning experiences that we would roll out a couple times a year. And so I earned some experience in informal STEM education, and I ended up working at Liberty Science Center after that. And then similarly, when I transitioned into science policy, around 2016 or so, I started getting more into political activism, which led to me working on a congressional campaign in 2018. And that kind of allowed me to transition into my job today. But by getting some experience in those areas, I felt a lot more comfortable than taking more major steps in those directions. Yeah. And you also meet a lot of great people who you can bounce ideas off of and serve as mentors and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, how about you?
I'll answer the first question. So I would say the only thing I would have done differently is definitely met with more people, not just in the science building, but professors outside of the science building that I thought were interesting areas, and even playing the LinkedIn roulette game and reaching out to alumni to see if they like their jobs and what they do, and kind of getting a little bit more feel for what all my options were. I was pretty quiet when I was trying to figure out what was for me and what wasn't for me. I wish I would have just had a little bit more thirst for what all the different career paths could have been at my disposal and used my resources at TCNJ to do that.
Thanks. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, I would say pretty much what Dan just said. So I do not regret where I am. I'm really happy with where I am, but if I could do something differently, I would go back to me in the second year of undergrad and research more what I could have done if I would have stayed in the med school route. Because I think it was, I gave up on it pretty easily when I saw I had one experience that it wasn't the best. It didn't mean that other ones couldn't have been, but I had a very limited view of what my options were. And it's not to fault, like you as a college student, if you're not exposed to that in your life or whatever, you have no idea. But I wish that I would have sought out more advice from professors or tried to find other resources so that I could make a more informed decision. And maybe I would have ended up in the same place where I would have gone the research route, but I feel like I gave up on that sooner than I needed to.
Yeah, you're right. And that question, hindsight is 2020, and also you don't know what you don't know, and right, all those sayings that fall into place here. Jayson, how about you?
Yeah, I'll answer the first question. And like others, it's difficult because I'm pretty happy with where I am. So you'd be afraid to change anything in case it set you down a different path. But I'd actually say something maybe opposite of what Lisa said, which is to, pull the ripcord sooner. Don't be afraid of pivoting and taking risk. And especially when you're young, you can bounce back, and people recognize and appreciate and respect, individuals that take risk. And so that's something that I would have probably encourage myself to, not be so focused on having it figured out. And the great thing about, the American education system versus other countries, you can pivot, right? You can go down science and then pivot into real estate or patent law, and in other education systems, you're very much on the straight and narrow. And so take advantage of that and don't be afraid of it.
Panelists, before I open it up to questions, we had a couple of other things we were thinking we were going to touch on. Is there anything that you didn't get a chance to say that you would like to share before I open it up to the audience? I'm trying to think if there were. I think we touched on most of the things broadly, but did I miss anything big? Okay, if not, Pam.
I think that all the panelists basically touched in some way on that liberal arts topic, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think everyone was saying they were pretty thankful for that liberal arts and to take advantage of that. And I kind of think that was already said, but I just kind of wanted to touch on that as well. I know it was touched on in our more casual planning conversation, so I did just want to pay some attention to the fact that, you are very exposed to that at TCNJ, so take advantage of it for all it's worth and explore it for all it's worth and all of that. And yeah, with that said, I will open it up for questions. We don't have any submitted yet, but surely I have to say, I think the conversation answered a lot of questions or at least gave a lot of food for thought, even to the point where now I'm like, oh, I should go back and take some science courses and open my mind.
Right. I'm trying to think. So I was
one thing I could add is I think as you're if you're thinking about making a pivot from a science career to something else, don't underestimate the value of like your extracurricular activities and kind of bringing those to the forefront to show that you've have an interest somewhere or that you have skills outside of the lab room, because I think particularly from a corporate setting, that's something that we really love to hear from potential candidates, and something that can really, tee up and make a resume stand out.
Mm-hmm. There, Pam, can you see the chat? I know there was at least one.
We had a request for Cece to show some of her biomed artwork. I don't know how readily available you have it, but
can I pipe up something about Cece and her artwork? So the biology department has commissioned Cece to create a piece of art for those of you who've been in the new biology building. If you graduated before 2000 or before, you may or may not have been there, but in the main stairwell, there's a nice tall 2-story space. And we've commissioned Cece to create some artwork for there. And I've seen some drafts of it. And it's really, she took input from all of us about what was important and needed to be in there. And it's just beautiful. So I'll give you a plug there.
Thanks. I don't have any artwork. Actually, that's a lie. I do have some right here in a folder. Would I be able to share the screen really quick? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I knew I was going to do that. Pam is a co-host. Can she share her screen briefly? We're trying to figure out technology.
I will spotlight your screen.
Oh, that's new. I've never done that before. Everybody's got looks of like extreme concentration.
Yeah, actually you should be able to share your screen if the bottom toolbar doesn't have the option.
Do you see it, Cece?
All right.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect. There we go. Even better.
Yeah, I have a few examples here. This is something that I did for the National Aquarium in Baltimore. They had discovered a new type of jellyfish and they wanted to show the different life stages of it. So something I was looking, the jellyfish was about like 2 millimeters. So it was really, really small. So I was looking at this under a microscope, sketching it, was able to develop these illustrations of it afterwards. I also have, sorry, it's opening, examples of surgical illustrations that I did at Hopkins. This was the result of going and watching surgeries. It was in the OR with the surgeon. They would be explaining what they're doing step by step. I would take sketches during the surgery and then afterwards met with the surgeon regularly to show them how the sketches were developing and then create a full color piece based on their what they wanted to focus on in the surgery. So they're just quick examples, wide variety of things that we can work on, but I felt like showing the biological and the medical is pretty good example.
That's cool.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they're beautiful, really beautiful. I see there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. So one was someone that's currently in a PhD program. I'm curious if you have advice to seek out job opportunities that are outside of your very specific niche, however you say that. So yeah, so I guess, you know, do you have any, you know, broad advice for someone who, you know, might want to move beyond? I mean, yeah, I've heard about people have said, you know, ask questions, talk to people, use opportunities to volunteer or do extracurricular activities to explore. What else? What am I missing?
I think, like, you know, others have mentioned, use career services on campus. You know, hopefully that's an option. In the science policy space, at least, there's a really great email newsletter from the American Institute of Physics called the AIP FYI email newsletter. And it comes out about weekly, and toward the bottom, there's always a few job opportunities, but it also talks about all the different organizations that are involved in science and technology policy. So that's a good way to get familiar with the different employers in that space, at least.
That's great. There was another question that's kind of the flip, right? So what if you are not in a science field and you want to transition into science? I know you all did kind of the opposite, but any thoughts on that? Or do you know, anybody have any advice for students wanting to go the other direction? And I guess, go ahead, Cece, you go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak not from my own personal experience, but from other people that were in the program with me at Hopkins. Half of the people were people who were art majors who decided they had an interest in biology and then decided to go into biomedical illustration that way. And then for them, I know it was a matter of just like taking courses on that were in biology or that were in like related fields so that they could have that background knowledge, but they didn't necessarily have to take it on as a full major. They just had to, you know, show that they had taken a few courses in it, have some of that background knowledge, and then they were able to transition into that career field.
Thank you. I know that the technical piece is the big one there, and there are opportunities for more and more, I think, you know, programs or certificates and masters, you know, there's a lot available now for things like that. How about, so any parting words of wisdom? Maybe I'll do that, sort of just go around and I'll try to mix it up in the order I've been doing things. Parting words of wisdom or thoughts you'd like to share. So I guess let's start with Mike. I'm gonna start with you. Sorry, I should have warned you I was gonna start with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, like others have said, you know, kind of, you know, be open to change. And yeah, I totally agree with the sentiment that was expressed earlier that, you know, when you enter college, you know, right out of high school, you know, you are just very young. And, you know, I think back to that time in my life, and, you know, it's very difficult to know yourself at that point and know what you'd like to do for a career. So, you know, just be open to things, and it's fine to figure things out as you go.
Thanks. Nicole.
I'd second what Mike just said. And I also, what Dan was saying earlier, just taking advantage of so many resources available to you, take advantage of them. I didn't do a good job of that while I was there. And I think there are a lot of opportunities, and that is, reflecting back, that is one thing I wish I had done. So.
Thank you. Jayson, how about you?
Yeah, not to reiterate what was said, maybe something slightly different. I think, I'm sort of jealous of this generation. You have LinkedIn, you have YouTube, you have, some newsletters that Mike mentioned. I mean, there's just so many, free or very close to free resources that you can use to explore different career opportunities. So I think that's something that's, I'd encourage folks, if you're interested in patent law, go find if there's a daily patent newsletter that just highlights some of the key developments that occur, on a daily or weekly basis, just to learn what's going on and is it interesting to you. And that's a pretty low energy, low effort way to figure out if you like something. Do you like reading about it, for example? It's parting thoughts.
Thank you. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm also a little jealous of, it just seems like there's so many, like at the colleges, it just seems like there's so many more ways that all of the professors and departments are trying to highlight all these other ways that you can, different career paths that you can go down that seem that they have a lot more different angles than what I kind of felt I was exposed to. Just things like forensic science or just all of these smaller degree or additional classes that get offered, and take advantage of it. And one thing I didn't mention is, so my second major was philosophy. And so it was a focus in bioethics. And, and ultimately I didn't go down that path, but it was, that department was still very interested in helping, any interest that I had, and really helping me, develop it and focus on it. And so not even just in the biology department or the other science departments, in other departments, there's really such a willingness to hear what you are interested in and help you develop something, or classes that are, more meaningful or that can kind of help you down whatever path will be fulfilling. So really, there's so much there, and just keep your eyes open to it.
Thank you. Dan, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I guess my biggest advice is, one, if there's the will, there's a way. So, stick with, if you've decided that you want to do something and you want to transition, you really do have to carve your own path. I mean, everybody out there just has such small mind share that you kind of have to connect the dots for them. So the more that you can be your own advocate and, get yourself out there and put yourself out there to make those inroads, I think it can seem daunting at the beginning, but it pays off in spades later.
Terrific. And Cece, you get the last word.
Sure. Something that I think personally helped me a lot while I was at TC&J is that anytime I was feeling stressed out about the future, about what career I was going to go into, because I didn't know when I first started at TC&J, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my biology degree. I just knew that I liked biology. And so something that helped me a lot was putting a lot of time to research what the options were. And that's how I found biomedical illustration. Nobody I knew could tell me about that field, but I had put in so many hours to research what the possible biology job options were out there. And, after hours and hours of researching, something, it's such a small field, but I was able to find it on probably a list somewhere of unique careers you can go into with biology. And just taking that time to dedicate to my future and to figuring out what I wanted to do really helped me out early on so that I could take the classes that I needed to take before I graduated.
Absolutely. So I guess, I'll just say, I think Pam, you kind of said something like this, that there's something about hearing about all these different experiences and what you're all doing where you have sort of that, buyer's remorse. Why did I stay doing what I was doing, when all this other neat stuff was out there? But the world of possibilities is really exciting to hear about. So I would just say to the audience, please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their perspective and their thoughts, because I think it's been an eye-opening conversation. I think I can clap, but I don't know that anybody else, you can't hear it. So imagine this is amplified, but But again, thank you all for, again, taking the time out of your day to be with us today, but also in preparation for this. And in particularly, thank you for your willingness to share your thoughts and perspectives, because I think it can be really important and helpful to students and even people who've graduated who might be considering whether or not they want to take the risk, take the jump, and try something new. So thank you.